When the company Blaze launched the original Evercade back in 2020, it felt like a pretty bold experiment. Now, more than 2 years after the launch of the Evercade line, we're getting a new handheld console, the EXP. Is it a solid evolution or a step backwards? Let's find out. Compared to the original Evercade, the EXP is slightly wider and thinner, which makes it a little more comfortable to hold for prolonged periods. The rear of the device is made from textured plastic, which provides enhanced grip. And on the whole, the EXP's design feels like a proper evolution over its predecessor. The unit feels solid and sturdy with no movement in the casing when gripped tightly, and makes us think of the iconic Apple products of the 2000s, as well as the Nintendo DS Lite. The only real mark against the EXP from a pure design perspective is the fact that, when played in complete darkness, you get some ugly light bleed on the bottom edge of the unit. The rolling D-pad and buttons are slightly spongy, but they're perfectly responsive. The shoulder triggers are much easier to use now thanks to the fact that the L2 and R2 buttons have a curve on them, allowing them to sit underneath your fingers during use more easily. The 800 by 480 pixel 4.3-inch IPS screen is a massive improvement over the rather dismal one seen on the original Evercade. It's sharper and brighter and has rock-solid viewing angles, something the original machine didn't possess. It's also covered by a sheet of tempered glass rather than cheap, easily scratched plastic, which is another big improvement. So the screen is definitely a step up then, but not totally perfect. The overall level of brightness is decent, but we'd argue it could perhaps have been a touch higher. We have to admit though, we've been spoiled by the screens on the Switch OLED and the Analog Pocket, both of which, however, cost significantly more than the Evercade EXP. The real star of the show, though, is the EXP's Tate mode. A button on the bottom edge of the unit rotates the screen so you can play arcade titles like Truxton and Mercs in the correct orientation. 2 additional action buttons, located on the left-hand side of the screen, complete the control setup when played in this way. It does take some getting used to play in Tate mode, as the unit has been primarily designed with horizontal play in mind. Battery life is rated at between 4 and 5 hours per charge, according to Blaze, which is close to what we found during our review period. The unit uses a USB-C connector for charging, which is another improvement over the original. Wi-Fi is included this time around as well, but will only be used for firmware updates, according to Blaze. Finally, there's 720p HDMI out via the mini HDMI socket on the top of the unit, but you'll need to source your own cable if you want to use it. Alongside the amazing Tate mode, the headline news regarding the EXP when it first was announced was the fact that it would ship with 18 Capcom titles pre-installed. This caused quite a bit of consternation among hardcore Evercade fans, as they felt this ran contrary to the platform's ethos of providing software on physical cartridges. From what we can gather, it was Capcom that was sticking point here rather than Blaze, and given the quality of the included titles, we're sure most people would rather have them pre-installed instead of not at all. There's a mix of arcade and home console titles there. Final Fight, Strider, Ghouls and Ghosts, Captain Commando, and Street Fighter II Hyper Fighting are some of the most acclaimed arcade titles of the 80s and 90s, and having them in portable form is a real delight. Factor in the ability to play 1943 and Mercs in Tate mode, and the package becomes even more appealing. Also in the box, you get the IREM Arcade Collection 1. R-Type will need little in the way of introduction, and is likely to be a title that will convince many to plump the cash for this device. However, our personal favorite on this cart is In the Hunt, which is created by the same team that would later produce the seminal Metal Slug. A shmup set underwater. It's a gorgeous looking title, and it packs a serious challenge too. Battle Chopper is also worth a look, as is the Shinobi-style action title Lightning Swords. The emulation on all these games is pretty much flawless. We also like the ability to play the games in competition mode, which disables save states. You can also set a coin limit for games to avoid the temptation of simply feeding credits to beat them. In terms of software options, save states are something of a godsend, especially on tough arcade titles. Purists might see them as a cowardly aid, but if your playtime is limited or you have the need to pause your progress often, then you'll begin to wonder how you ever coped without them. Oh, and there are also some CRT-style scanline options. And for once, they actually look decent. Finally, it's worth noting that in the best tradition of old-school cheat codes and secrets, there are 5 hidden games to unlock, if you know where to look. The original Evercade handheld was a welcome surprise, but one that certainly left room for improvement. The EXP is an important step in refining the concept thanks to its superior design, improved screen, and amazing tape mode, the latter of which will make the device even more attractive to serious arcade fans. Despite the polish, a few rough edges remain. Battery life could be better. The screen isn't quite OLED standard, and the fact that light bleeds through the casing is unfortunate. But on the whole, the EXP is everything we could possibly want from the next Evercade handheld. Time Extension gives the Evercade EXP an 8 out of 10.